Welcome to the video on setting your own height maps and biome maps in MC Terrain. I'm in a project, we've got MC Terrain loaded and we've got the biome manager highlighted, and you can see here we've got custom textures and see tooltips for format. So there's tooltips on here which tell us what sort of format we need to have for our textures. So the texture needs to be 512 by 512 pixels. The format needs to be RGB24, which means it's an uncompressed, and the read-write needs to be true and the compression set to none, which gives you the RGB24. Now I've put a couple of textures in here already, custom biome texture examples. If we go in there, there's a very simplified biome pattern and there's a checkers pattern. It has to be a grayscale image because it's a height map. And the biome pattern, you have to use colours that are already defined in your biome data. So the biome data is in scripts, biomes, data, and I've used white, which is the coldest one, which is ice, and I've also used hot wetter data, and the colour there, if you click onto the colour, it gives you the RGB of 29, 73 and 40. So I've made sure that the green colour on my biome is 29, 73, 40, so then it will pick it up as being that biome. So that's all we need for the textures. So if we go back onto Biome Manager, you can see at the moment we haven't got any of the two textures in, so at the moment it's going to be generating the data from these settings. If you've already watched the biome video, you will know all about these settings and how they work, but we can do a quick example. So if I was to change deep water right up, then it will make the map completely water. Then if we do preview biome layout, we can see it's turned completely to deep water. So if I revert that and we go preview biome layout again, then it will put it back as it was so we can see our map. So what would happen if you wanted to use the height map details from this, but you wanted to make your own biomes, so you didn't want the biomes necessarily to follow the height map in this fashion. So what you can do then is go back to our textures, custom biome example textures, biome manager, and we can drop this rather uninteresting biome pattern in there. So now we've got the temperate rainforest around the outside and we've got ice in the middle. So if we were to start our game now, we'll see our character will be standing on ice. There, there's a rather cold snowy landscape up here. We don't see much of it because I've got the distance in Terrain Manager set to only 50 meters, so it's only drawing a few chunks for us because we don't need it to be any further, just for demonstration. So if we stop that and we take our biome pattern off, we can go back to none, then it will regenerate it exactly as it was. And if we just start the game as it is now, we can see that the height map was exactly the same and it's just the textures that have changed. There, so exactly the same scene, but it's using the textures from the generated biome map rather than our imported biome map. So we can do exactly the same idea with the height map. We've got our checkers pattern, so we can put that in there. Now if we start now, you can see that the land has gone completely different because we've got our checkered pattern. So we're standing on the edge of rather a lot of cliff. We've still got the grass and we've still got the desert, so it's using the same biome map, but it's just using our custom height map instead. So we can stop that one. Now we can of course use them both together, so if we add our biome pattern in, and run again, then we'll have him on the ice and the mountains all at the same time. And I think this is actually my favourite because it makes a really exciting terrain with all sorts of caves and craziness. Now if you've watched any of the other videos, you'll know that this temporary character, which is why he says I'm only temporary, replace me, isn't very good at all, so you need to put a proper one on because the camera, as you can see, will go behind the terrain, but he's on there just so you can start the game up and get something happening. There's plenty of videos and instruction on how to change the character to something a bit more sensible. I have an example of 2 different ones, so be sure to check those out before you get any further with looking at this. But for what we want to do now, it's fine, and I think that's a really exciting terrain that it generates on that one. So if we stop that one there, we can of course take both of those off and go back to our original scene. There, our original scene. And if we play it just one more time, we can see how just by changing those 2 textures we can make completely different terrain without having to change anything else. There, we're in exactly the same place on the map, but it looks quite different because we've taken our custom biome map and height map textures off. Now one thing to be aware of, the add CMap border, if you've watched the biome video you will know that by ticking that, if you then preview the biome layout, it will add a sea border to make the biome into an island. There, now our sea border has been generated. However, if you've got add CMap border ticked, it won't add a CMap border to a custom texture. It'll only add it to an internally generated texture, so that's something to be aware of. Now we've got a button down here, remove all cached biome data. Now when it's generating the biome data and the height map data, it does cache it on the hard drive in the application persistent data folder. This speeds up loading as it doesn't need to then regenerate all the data every time. If you're working on the code that generates these textures and you introduce a bug, then if the code doesn't go all the way through, you might have cached data that doesn't match the settings. So the easiest way to solve that is just to click remove all cached biome data, and it'll delete all the cached data to get you back in sync again. That's it for this video. Check out the website for other videos and full documentation for the package.